Hello again, friends. Matt with Eddie's Guitars coming to you, as always, from St. Louis, Missouri. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Gage Halland of Halland Guitars out of Lewiston, Montana. And Gage was kind enough to come through St. Louis here to leave us with a couple brand new Halland guitars. We are excited to be Gage's newest dealer here in North America. And like I said, he brought us a couple of exquisite guitars. And he's actually just off of the Artisan guitar show that he just attended and showcased at over this past weekend. And Gage, welcome to Eddie's Guitars. We are thrilled to have you here and take a look at a couple of your guitars.
Thanks for making the time for me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we're going to jump right into it here, folks. We're super excited about the guitars that Gage has brought us here. And we were hoping you could kind of help walk us through a couple of these and kind of show us exactly what we're looking at here. The first of which is a just downright gorgeous example here. Gage, what are we looking at here?
This is my triple OH, which is kind of fits between my OM and my double O. And when it's a show guitar, you can kind of pick whatever you want. So I built a guitar that I would probably build for myself, which is a small body, domestic hardwoods. So it's bird's eye maple back and sides. The top is actually a torrefied moon spruce top. And then I like to say we just like lightly toasted it. So it's not a full burst, but, you know, darken the edges. One of the things that I'm kind of proud of on this is that I've really wanted to try this finish for a long time where I get a matte finish for the body itself, but then I do gloss finish for the binding. And I really feel like it adds a lot of texture to the look of the guitar.
Dimension.
It makes it pop a little bit more.
Absolutely.
But yeah, 14 frets to the body, just kind of your typical 25.4 scale length. Yeah, it's a great little maple guitar.
Beautiful bird's eye, and just the way that finish kind of accentuates the depth of that figure in the bird's eye is really pretty spectacular. I like how you glossed out the heel cap and everything as well. Yeah, and just like you said, the visual of the kind of the matte against the gloss binding is a...
Well, you don't really, some angles you don't notice. If you look at it from the side, it looks all glossy, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those, like, I did it once and I don't know if I ever want to do it again. But it has a matte neck too, and I think all guitars should have matte necks.
Yeah, it sure feels right. It has a nice kind of organic feel to it. Really neat kind of back strap matching on the back of the headstock there with that nice volute there. And I've got to say, just a powerful looking headstock, really sharp headstock all the way around. The way it's beveled and purfled in everywhere there, really very sharp. No inlays on the fingerboard. Very, very clean all the way through. Just a jet black ebony fingerboard and bridge. And tell us about the rosette that you have here.
So the rosette, the interior woods are Kentucky Buckeye burl, and then some special blue abalone shell. And I kind of have my own purfling scheme that all my guitar tops have, which is the orange and blue purflings. And like you had said before, if no one says anything, you don't right away pick up that there's color in there. Right. So it's kind of fun to find later.
It's really a subtle touch on the top here, kind of that first ring of orange, and then it kind of or goes into the blue there. Really a nice transition, and when you get up close, it's very rewarding to see all that. And yeah, the blueness of that power is...
Yeah, it really gets accentuated when you throw blue purfling next to it.
Yeah.
It kind of pops.
Pulls out the purples and pinks. Yeah, that's amazing. Really nice. And of course, folks, we're going to be playing both of these guitars that we're looking at thoroughly today, so do stick with us for sure. But yeah, amazing. And you said torrefied moon spruce with bird's eye maple on 25.4-inch scale length. We are very eager to dig into this guitar, but I have one more to share with you before we get too far here. Gage, admittedly, this one I am really, really excited about myself. What are we dealing with here?
So this is my DH model. So this would essentially be my version of like a modified modern dreadnought or interpretation of, with some considerations taken to make sure it feels smaller than a dreadnought would. So it fits a wider variety of players, I feel, than a standard dread would. But this has a Swiss moon spruce top, very old straight grain set of Cocobolo for the back and sides. This is a multi-scale with, I think, kind of the perfect scale lengths. Is 26.25 on the bass side, 25.5 on the treble. Yeah, it's kind of a cavernous, lush-sounding guitar, and it doesn't feel huge.
I had the opportunity to play it just a little bit earlier, and if you want to talk about your grand piano effect, this is your long, ringing, sustained, big, bold, deep, all of those adjectives. Yeah, another beautiful, bold rosette. And just all of the ergonomic considerations that you've made here, I've got to tell you, are amazing to actually. I've never played a guitar with a rib rest like this before, and we need to indulge our folks on this cocobolo as well here before we get too far. Amazing set of quarter sawn cocobolo, and like I said, that rib rest that he has in here is just a major comfort to the player, and the way it's all presented there is just really exquisite. I've got to say,
Well,
a lot of fun.
A lot of people, they don't get they don't enjoy playing a bigger dreadnought because you're pulling your shoulder pretty far over.
Sure.
The combination of the two bevels together, you're essentially making the guitar feel almost 1.25 inches narrower.
I see that.
So it almost presents more like the triple O does than a dreadnought.
Yeah.
So you can play for a longer period of time without your arm going numb.
Well, and if sonically what you're going after is produced by a bigger guitar, this is sure a great way of being able to achieve that with like you said, without abusing yourself to physically be able to play it. And the spread of the especially on the low end, you said it was 26.25.
26 and a quarter. Yeah.
Just an awesome spread there. Again, very powerful headstock here if we've got it in focus at all there. Really spectacularly sharp. But anything you can tell us about what we can't see under the hood?
I build my guitars to have more of a reflective back than like a diffuser. So my guitars are heavier. I like a thicker back on the guitar. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times people pick up, they kind of get surprised by the mass of it. And I would say, show me the ultralight Steinway piano.
Sure.
Like mass makes tone.
Sure.
And having mass where you need it that's the challenge, right? Like we don't want a heavy top, but we do want everything else, the skeletal system of the guitar essentially to have some heft to it. Mm-hmm. Not only does it make for a more stable guitar long run, but I do feel like you're sort of allowing the frequencies to move about the guitar. I wouldn't say uninhibited, but at least more effortless than.
Well, and I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I think you hit this guitar and it just doesn't stop ringing. It just keeps going and going, and the sustain qualities of it are very obvious that, something is making that happen here. Yeah. And I've got to say, we'll get a close-up of this for sure, but the just the fretwork on this is just beautifully done. These are gold Evos, it looks like, with semi-hemispherical fret ends. They're just, if you see little details like that, in my brain, you can almost assume a lot of the other stuff has kind of been taken care of. When you see nice little details like that, kind of implies a lot, I think. But absolutely exquisite work. And Gage, we are super eager to play these. And again, just really grateful for you to come into town and leave us with a couple of guitars.
Thanks for hosting me. I like it.
Absolutely. Gage, you're just off of the Artisan Guitar Show. Tell us about it.
It was my first time at the Artisan Show, and John throws a heck of a show. Us guitar makers, I think, tend to see these shows as a way to reconnect with each other because all of us work in dark caves for most of the year, and it's our only human interaction, basically. But yeah, I got to reconnect with a lot of my clients on the East Coast because being in Montana, I don't get over here nearly enough. And yeah, there's a lot of really incredible stuff being made, and it's always kind of inspiring to leave and kind of get back to the shop. And
you beat me to it. That was going to be my next question. Is I can only imagine. I'm a guitar player, or pretend to be, not a builder, but as a builder, I can imagine attending shows, especially like you said, when you're kind of on your own, in your own world for most of the time, being able to get out and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is what's been going on out here, can be massively inspiring.
Well, and you don't feel, it sounds weird to say, but I think a lot of times you feel like you're kind of operating in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And you you get to see, I mean, we all sit and have dinner after the shows, and all, you know, the makers and players and friends, and we all get to compare basically the struggles that we're all going through. We're all going through the same ones, and
Sure.
it's nice to actually hear from other people like, yeah, I had to figure that out too, and this is how I did it. And
Sure.
it's a very supportive craft in the, there's not a lot of secrets in it. We're all, it's one of those, you know, when one boat, you know, or the tide lifts all boats. And
Yep.
I think that if we can all get together and in a friendly manner share that stuff, it only helps all of us. There's really no downside.
I've got to tell you, just as a, I guess, outsider, again, somebody who doesn't build guitars, it's really cool to see the camaraderie amongst builders, and I don't want to say a lack of competition, but it's more of an encouraging, seemingly kind of a vibe. And keep pushing kind of thing.
Well, and you know, I would say at least 50% of the interactions that you have at a guitar show typically are with aspiring guitar makers.
Yeah,
which, you know, there's times where you're like, I just wish there were more buyers coming through. But I also get really excited because I remember being, you know, that guy and meeting the builders that were as enthusiastic about telling me about how they approach something. It just sort of fueled the fire for me to continue on doing it.
Awesome.
And I think that within, you know, as you said, we're not competitive in the sense that I want to succeed over someone else, because none of us are producing anything in numbers large enough to really matter.
Right.
There's 8 billion people in the world, and I have to find 12 a year that want to buy my stuff. So, or at least have similar tastes, right? And I think that, you know, if I can help a friend of mine with something that they've been working towards, even if they directly copied what I did, it's not going to sound like my work.
Sure.
It's going to sound like, you know, Judd's or whoever's. And the fingerprints of the maker are impossible to remove. Mm-hmm. The only way to make their work sound exactly like mine is if I make it.
Right.
So what's the point? But yeah, it's a weird community that way. I mean, I came from motorcycle racing and stuff like that, and all of that is like, we're constantly cheating to beat each other, and you know, it's a different world for sure.
Yeah. You apprenticed with our mutual friend, Mr. Michael Greenfield.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, perhaps?
Yeah, it was the best 2 years of my life, and also the hardest, probably.
Yeah.
Michael, one of the reasons I was excited to be his apprentice is that he just doesn't give you any breaks. And I mean that, like, his expectation is that you're going to do work at his level. So he sets you up so that you can work towards doing that. And and from the beginning, he told me, like, this is not school. This is a business, and we have to deliver.
Yeah.
I think that I don't think I would be the guitar maker that I am today. I don't think I'd be a professional guitar maker, period, if I hadn't had that apprenticeship where Michael, he could be a hard-nosed teacher, but he's teaching. Mm-hmm. And as long as I was open up to the idea that I have to check my ego and that I'm not an expert at any of this stuff, that I'm a newbie the whole time, it was a mind-blowing experience. Like, we built so many amazing guitars, and I got to interact with so many amazing players because of that opportunity that I would not have had anywhere else.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's one of my closest friends. We talk every week. On top of being just a great mentor, he's taught me a lot of other things that have nothing to do with guitar making.
Sure.
You know.
Well, and that's kind of the way it goes when you walk similar paths, you know, from a professional standpoint. Oftentimes other things, you know, you kind of share in common and can, you know, becomes a very efficient relationship in a lot of ways.
Well, and he's still, it's funny because I mean, I think people say, oh, it looks just like a Greenfield. Well, yeah, of course it does, because the imprints of his teaching is on everything I do.
Sure.
I do different, this is my own shape I've drawn up for all my guitars. The rosette is a nod to Michael out of respect for everything he did for me. In the Spanish tradition, you take your mentor's rosette, you add something or make it in some way yours, but it's to help create a lineage of design, essentially.
That's awesome.
and he's been nothing but supportive since I left, and I have eternal gratitude toward him.
He sure seems to be a treasure in the luthier community.
Yeah. And he also showed me you can do it your own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a very smart businessman, and he approaches it as a business. And a lot of the interactions, my first mentor was John Graven, and he's 180 degrees from Michael Greenfield. But John is sort of a bottomless pit of information in the history of the Western steel string guitar.
Sure.
So his guitars very much follow that vein. And I'm also very grateful to John for introducing me to the guitar making world, but that was not my interest, was the historical copy of a guitar.
Right.
Michael really introduced me to making my guitars. And I think that if I'd have stuck around and kept producing what I was producing under, I was never John's apprentice, but he just let me hang around his shop and not touch anything. Mm-hmm. But if I'd kept doing that, I probably would have moved on to something else by now.
Interesting. So about a month ago, one of our mutual friends actually was in town here, and he happens to be a fairly well-known banjo player in Montana, kind of your neck of the woods there, Mr. Tony Polecastro. Yeah. And your name actually came up surrounding some of the drama around one of his new guitars, but without rehashing that entire story, he was just he wanted to instill in us how helpful you were in that situation.
Yeah, that's well, first of all, I'm surprised he got here, because I don't know if you know, Tony can't read, so getting here and through all the signs in the airports was probably difficult.
I'm sure he was FaceTiming.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
somebody.
His wife takes care of him.
Yeah,
but that was a really unfortunate incident that is entirely Tony's fault. And Tom Sands built this incredibly gorgeous guitar that sounded incredible, and thankfully I was able to help in the situation and just let Tom use my bench and fix Tony's guitar, and it's good as new. So
beautiful.
That's why you don't give guitars to banjo players.
Well, I was going to say, you know who not to build a guitar for in Montana now, should he ever come knocking.
If the crazy bearded man knocks on your door. But, so kind of we touched a little bit on it when we were talking about the inserts in the neck, and kind of I feel like the acoustic guitar world is very traditionalist, or fairly traditionalist in an aesthetic sense. Like, it has to be guitar shaped, and there's variances in like purflings and inlays and things like that. But for the most part, you can't deviate too far outside of those parameters. And my interest is in seeing how far we can push the acoustic guitar. Like, how I don't believe that we've reached peak acoustic. I think that we can make it better. Not by much. I mean, we're working within the parameters of physics, right? Mm-hmm. So, at some point, unless it's plugged in, we've reached as loud as it can safely get without coming apart. Mm-hmm. So I'm really interested in and really inspired by industries where they're using science and technology to further it. And if you think of aerospace, specifically helicopters are really interesting. The vibrations and frequencies that helicopters have to go through, and to withstand them, they use a lot of composite technology, but it's the same way that F1 cars do, right? They're accomplishing a task we're familiar with, but they're always pushing the way they do that. And that's kind of what I'm shooting for, is I want to keep pushing the design of my guitars, but I want it all to be under the skin. So that it looks like a familiar acoustic guitar that you want to pick up and play, and not so much like an art project or something that, hang on the wall. Sure. But yeah, and so my guitars, I've been taking aerospace composites courses and trying to get I want a real grasp on things before I start putting it into my guitars, and even then it has to get the approval over the course of a year or two before I can put it into a client's guitar.
Sure.
I'm excited. I think that if I couldn't do that, it becomes stale pretty quick.
Yeah. And so walk me through, if you can, when you say, I want to try X idea, whether it's with a neck or whatever it may be, from the time that you conceptualize it, I mean, this might be a silly question, but how long does it take to get it to where you can see, okay, will this work?
What I used to do, and it works for some people, and I've only recently kind of become okay with how I do it. I used to sketch it out and start making prototypes of that thing and just produce. And then you test it and break it and then refine. And I became very okay with mentally keeping this design going in my head and just refining it. And then as I'm doing the guitar, I go, oh, that wouldn't work because of X, Y, or Z. And then you're refining it in your head. So that by the time I start producing the first whatever it is that I'm doing for the guitar, there aren't that many iterations that have to take place to start to use that product. So if, for instance, my necks, I don't use truss rods. I use these carbon fiber inserts that are made by an aerospace company that they make the helicopter rotor blades for Apache helicopters. And I firmly believe that it's a superior system to a truss rod. And I actually think it was Dana Bourgeois who said that the truss rod solves the problem the truss rod causes, and that is that you cut a channel in the neck and weaken the neck, and then you put this metal truss rod in there and you try to bring it back to where it was.
Yeah.
Well, if it doesn't move in the first place, do you need the truss rod? And that's sort of put me down the road for this, and now we're working on the second iteration of this, which addresses some things I don't like about this system, and I think will make the guitar better. But I get to iterate that in my head over and over again while I'm making guitars. So the new one, I started considering the changes that needed to be made when I started using the first one.
Of course.
And now we're at the point, tooled up to where I can start making them the way that I want. I would like to get away from having a third party producing those because I like to have more control over the end product.
Sure.
I mean, I'm never going to make the same quality as an aerospace company, but, I don't have an autoclave, and I don't think I can afford one.
Well, and just, again, an outsider's observation of when I pick this guitar up and look at it and play it and I hear it, I think there's nothing I would improve on this guitar. There's nothing that can improve on this guitar yet. You're not satisfied with that.
No. Well, I mean, I'm thrilled with how they sound, if I'm honest. I think all guitar makers, whether you want to or not, you have to make something that you like. Mm-hmm. If you didn't like it, you would change something, right? So I'm nearly 10 years into doing this full time, and by now I've kind of refined my recipe for the guitar to where I don't feel like I make duds. I don't have a guitar that comes out where I'm like, it's okay. I would change it if I did that, to be honest with you. And I think that when it comes to like this guitar in particular, it does everything I love. Mm-hmm. So if I don't know a specific thing to make better, can't I make the whole thing a little bit better? Like, can I turn it just to 11?
Sure.
And I think that that's where I'm heading. I don't know. I mean, again, we might do the whole thing, put the new neck inserts in these guitars and find out they don't sound as good. Mm-hmm. And then you just chuck it and then go back to this and then refine it somewhere else.
Sure.
But I don't know many builders who just, rinse, repeat. None of us like to do the same thing forever. So I think that a lot of us are refining constantly.
Always got the gears turning.
Yeah. It's fun. It's problem solving all the time, which is great. And, you don't sometimes know what the problem is until you fixed it. And you're like, that was kind of fantastic.
Interesting. Gage, when you're not building exquisite instruments such as this, what do you like to do to fill your time?
Well, I live in Montana, and by law, you have to be outside if it's sunny. So we spend most of the summer camping and rafting and, doing fun things. And my wife and I actually, we both coach CrossFit.
Oh, really?
So that's another thing that takes up our time during the week, kind of a mental break where you can't focus on anything but surviving. But yeah, most of my hobbies revolve around doing something with my hands. So I was a motorcycle mechanic for a long time.
Oh, awesome.
And I don't ride bikes anymore after I got, I have two sons. I kind of moved away from the motorcycles, but I'm into Land Cruisers and old Land Rovers
Cool.
and stuff. So we restore some trucks at our place, and
Very fun.
yeah, I cook a lot. I love cooking, but mostly spend time with my wife and kids.
Nice. Doing the outdoor Montana stuff.
Yeah,
Beautiful. Are there any drawbacks working in the extremes of Montana?
yes and no. So my thing is, I would much rather humidify than dehumidify. So my shop, I use they're hard-lined gallery humidifiers. So they're silent, which is a big pet peeve of mine to have things running in the background. But they're just, they read the room. They release enough humidity to keep me at 72 degrees and 45% humidity year round. But one of the reasons we chose the part of Montana that we're in is it's very close in climate to like Bend, Oregon, where Breedlove Guitars is. And for most of the year, it sits in that perfect window of humidity. And so I was in Portland, Oregon for many years building, and you're constantly running a humidifier and a dehumidifier because the weather the humidity changed so rapidly there. And so it was nice to come to a place where I don't have to think about it so much anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the guitars are better for it, to be honest. I know that at no point when I was gluing plates together did the humidity spike that day or drop. And I feel like I'm able to ship a much more stable instrument because of it. That being said, there's guitar makers in Hawaii and lots of places that deal with humidity, and we all seem to be okay. I talked to a bunch of people at the show and asked them, and they just said they just realize there are days they're not going to be able to work. They go out and they look at their numbers and they say, no, not today. So everyone, we all make efforts. I just happen to have picked a place where I seem to have optimized the environment for what I do.
Nice. And roughly on an annual basis, how many guitars are you producing?
I do 12. I'm gonna, like I said, I was going to drop it to 8, and then I told 2 people I'd build them guitars this year. So we're back up to 10 this year, but I do 12. That's been my average for a few years now.
Gotcha.
I was batch building, so I would do 4 to 7 guitars at a time, and it ends up being so stressful, and cutting miters is really monotonous when you've got that many to do.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
taking a page from the Ben Wilborn book and doing 1 guitar a month now. And in the hopes of refining my process and speeding things up a little bit. And I feel like I get to focus more on the details of the guitar. It's when you've got 7 to do,
Juggling act.
oh man, there's no available brain space. It's all full of like what goes on this one. And,
Sure.
but
I mean, building 12 guitars a year, to the average person out there might think, boy, that's not a lot of guitars, but that's a lot of work for one person.
yes, I wish I could bring someone on to be an apprentice or something, but I'm not the kind of person that can like, yeah, go ahead, you'll be fine.
That's kind of exactly where I was going is, do you have any intention of opening that door someday?
If the right person came along, yes, I would absolutely do that. I don't know how that functions anymore though, because the European apprenticeship model where you come and you work for free for 2 years or whatever, I don't think you can do that anymore. How does a person do that? When you're gainfully employed and you can barely make ends meet, how can I ask someone to come and essentially be a student for 2 years? I did that with Michael Greenfield, and I don't regret a minute of it, but I think it was different then. That was close to 11 years ago. So, if it was the right person, I would consider it. I get requests frequently. I've just never been in the position. My current shop's very small, for one thing, and having another human in there would not. We'd be stepping on each other. So, maybe in the future. I have 2 sons. Neither of them are really interested in guitars, but I might trick them into being interested in guitar making. So
there you go. Keep the Halland name alive.
yeah, well, I've got my oldest he's a percussionist, and we just built him a drum kit.
Really?
Yeah, and it's more simple than a guitar, but it's so much worse.
Really?
Oh, what's the worst parts of guitar making? It's all sanding.
Bending?
Well, that's easy. Yeah.
Is it?
Well, because it's veneers. It's not like solid wood.
Sure.
So the veneer part's not bad, but it's the finishing a guitar is bad enough, but you have to finish a bass drum.
Yeah, right.
And my OCD does not allow me to be like, it's okay, it's good enough. And my son's like, no one's gonna look. So we spent far too much time on the finish for a drum kit.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's fun. Do you ever draw off inspirations outside of the guitar world?
I would say almost exclusively. Like, I don't do the forum stuff online. I'm always amazed at what other makers are doing, but I learned early on with myself that I don't want to be influenced to make something like anyone else's stuff. And I think there's makers out there where Cassini Guitars is a great example. You're never going to confuse that for someone else's work, right? They are kind of isolated in the sense that they're South African. There's not a huge number of guitar makers coming from South Africa. And so I think that speaks through their design, is that we're operating in our own world.
Yeah.
And of course, I can't avoid other people's work because I follow all these guys on social media stuff, right? So it's absolutely there. But most of my inspiration comes from believe it or not, like the automotive world. I'm really into European cars from the 60s and 70s. Yep. Watches. Just the fine engineering and machining that goes into making a watch that is expected to run for hundreds of years with only mechanical inputs is pretty amazing to me. But then, like, my wife thinks I'm the biggest weirdo in the world, and if I'm going to sleep at night, I listen to like YouTube videos of people machining stuff.
Really?
Like, just explaining what the processes they're going through. Maybe that says something about their videos, that's how I go to sleep. But they're also, it's fascinating to me, and it's another world where I just feel like if I took all my inspirations from guitar related things, I would make a pretty run of the mill instrument. And I feel like automotive racing, right? Like, Colin Chapman said that if you want to go faster, add lightness. Well, that's guitar making, right?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
There's a lot of people who go the ultralight route, and all those little influences that come from other places can be applied to this stuff, whether that's aesthetically or when it comes to engineering the instrument.
Sure.
There's definitely those guitars that I see and I just go, it's so tastefully done, and I shoot for that. One that I just look at it and there's nothing that you could put your finger on and say that's perfect because of that. But there's an electric company, Jersey Girl Handmade Guitars.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big color guy. My color palette's not huge, but they use color in amazing ways, and I can't put my finger on why it works on everything they make. And so I definitely get inspired by guitar makers, but I try to not let it influence me too much. And I would rather someone say, oh, I see, Ferrari 250 GTO and that. And no one's ever going to say that, but still, I would like that to be the influence that people see.
Awesome.
I would like to be more of a reflection of me and my interests.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of my personal interests are about performance and fine work. And so, I'm a big fan of old Porsches and Ferraris and, BMWs, and they all do something really well. They might not be the most powerful thing in the world, but they do something very, very well. That's kind of what I'm after.
Awesome. You used to race bikes and cars too?
So my grandfather was the crew chief for the world's fastest diesel freightliner. So
really,
when I was in 8th grade, he took me to Bonneville Salt Flats. He was racing the truck. And it's a semi-truck that goes 258 miles an hour.
Jesus.
And that was my introduction to the automotive world, and just like, it's like getting punched in the guts when those cars take off.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't think anybody could go see that and not be affected. But I from that moment on, my first car that was mine and not shared among my brothers was a 54 Bel Air that I don't think ever left the driveway. I just worked on it all the time. And then from there, I got into muscle cars. And when my wife and I were first married, I actually wanted to be a Porsche mechanic, so I went to school for it.
Awesome.
And I kind of had this epiphany. I was like, I don't want to work on other people's toys. I want to drive Porsches, not do oil changes.
Yeah.
So I left, and I worked in the coffee world for quite a while. And then I walked into a motorcycle shop that was near my home, and they gave me a job fixing bikes, which is just about the most fun you can have in a job. You fix them and take them for a test ride. Fix them and take them for a test ride. So, but yeah, during this whole time, it was really strange. As a high schooler, I played bass, and I wasn't good at it. I was never an acoustic guitar player, but if I look back at, like, I still have my college notebooks, and there's like acoustic guitars drawn in the margins.
Yeah.
I'm like, why did I draw that? And my mother-in-law got me a book called Handmade, Hand Played. And it was all of these small guitar makers. I didn't know at the time, but Michael Greenfield and John Graven were in there.
No way.
And John's name popped up, and it said Portland, Oregon. And I was like, well, I wonder if he's in the phone book. And so I find him, and he's kind enough to let me come in. And I don't know if you know his history as being, he was the shop foreman at Gruen Guitars for years. Right. So I remember he answered his door, and he goes, come in, I'll try to talk you out of this. And
beautiful.
It backfired in a huge way, because I walked in just like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I left and almost immediately started acquiring tools and wood. And I think I was working on my first guitar, and I told my wife, I was like, this is it. This is my thing. Like, I'm never going to do anything else. And then I had the realization that if I'm going to do this professionally, I need to cut my learning curve, because John's famous for saying you don't know anything until you've built 250 guitars. And I think that number has actually been greatly reduced by the internet and access to information, because he's he's 100% correct when he was coming up.
Sure.
But yeah, I got through, I got most of the way through that first guitar, and I was like, I got to go to school for this. And so I went to Lutherie school, and I finished, and I thought, I still don't know enough to justifiably ask someone to pay for my work. I felt it was like imposter syndrome, but I was really an imposter, not just feeling that way. And so then I got the apprenticeship with Michael Greenfield, and I remember I was leaving, and he's, we had both grown close at this point, and it was kind of hard to go. And he's like, you're going to be fine. And it's kind of like sending your kid off to college thing. And it was a fantastic time. So I left, and when I left school, John, I don't know if you know this, but John Graven he's just totally against apprenticeships. He thinks they're a waste of time, and you just need to start building guitars. And so I called him, and I said, I have this opportunity at Greenfield Guitars, or I said, I have this opportunity to be an apprentice. He goes, you don't need to be an apprentice. And I said, well, it's at Greenfield Guitars. He goes, well, you have to take it.
Awesome.
So he was smart enough to know, and I listened to him. And he still makes guitars. I don't remember how old he is now, but there was a time he's cranking out 52 guitars a year.
Wow. And
by himself in a space about this size. Wow. And now I think he's slowed down a little bit, but still like cranking out. He's definitely making more than I am. That's for sure.
Folks, I think it's safe to say we are plenty eager to hear both of these lovely instruments. So let's take a listen now. Gage, it was a real pleasure to have you in our shop. We sure appreciate you coming in and dropping off a couple of really amazing guitars. We're thrilled to be Halland Guitars' newest dealer here, and just thrilled to be working with you.
Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, thanks.